Back for more camp notes here on Warchant TV. He's Irish Rafael, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. You guys enjoyed the News Digesty feature that we released earlier this week so much that we put a name on it. It's called The Chant, and henceforth, this feature will be called The Chant. You can expect it on your multimedia feeds, podcast, and/or right here on Warchant TV a couple of times a week. Ira, I like the name. This is a 5-star Schofel production right here. I know that you coined this term, and I think it suits us perfectly because we get in, we get out, we give you the news.
Yeah, man, it's a little, the abbreviated name of Warchant, and this is kind of the abbreviated news. It's not everything you're going to get at warchant.com if you subscribe and take part in the entire experience. But yeah, we'll keep you up to date on the Chant as well.
So the first topic today that we'll get into is about injuries. Ira, I was there yesterday with y'all for interviews Saturday the 16th for clarity when Mike Norvell was speaking on, Florida State pivoting, and they're getting close to full-on Alabama prep from, preseason camp into the proper install. And he was pretty forthcoming about injuries, more so than I expected when I got into the building. And a lot of players' names came up, whether it's guys that are on the mend or maybe a couple of surprise names or new developments of players who might have gotten banged up in the last week of practice. Where do you think we should start? Because we could go to skill position players or guys in the trenches. What do you think?
Well, real quick, I think the reason he did that, and we all know Mike Norvell does not like talking about injuries. I feel like he wanted to share some of the positive developments. But if he didn't tell us that, then he couldn't cop out to the fact that they had been injured in the first place. Like Gavin Blackwell, for example, I think he's a good place to start. He's a guy that we haven't talked about much in preseason because he has been banged up. From our understanding, he was fine going into camp. I think it was the very first practice. He had, kind of a tweak something in his lower body, maybe a knee or something in his lower body that first week and the first day. And hadn't really practiced since then, but he was back out there last week, and I think, on Saturday, and I think that's a significant one. Of all the transfers Florida State brought in this offseason, he's probably the least talked about. He was a wide receiver they added late in the spring, but I think they're pretty enthused about what he can do for this offense. He is a guy that played 3 or 4 years at North Carolina. His freshman year, or his redshirt freshman year, had over 20 catches. I mean, he was pretty productive early on. Then he seemed to kind of fall out of the rotation, dealt with some injuries, and he played in an offense that's pretty similar to what Florida State wants to do at North Carolina. Their offensive coordinator, I think, was Chip Lindsey, was from the Gus Malzahn tree, and there's some connections there. And so they felt like it was going to be a pretty seamless transition. Wide receiver is a position, I know we're going to talk about it more in this episode, but that's a position they're looking for some players to step up to join that top 3 of Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, and Javen Boggs. And Gavin Blackwell might be a guy that kind of pushes into that mix. And so I think he wanted to tell us he was back, and he kind of had to fess up to the fact that he hadn't really been practicing.
That's fair. And Squirrel White is obviously another name in that receiver room. But before I get to Squirrel on the update there, Tim Harris Jr., the position coach, said you wouldn't have known that Gavin Blackwell missed this much time with the way that he came prepared and once he put pads on and appeared on the field in practice, which is, a good sign because they're starving for depth and proven depth. And I think Ira was telling that they went out and got Gavin Blackwell in the portal to begin with in the first place. It's kind of like the message they sent when they went and got Jerry Wilson or when they got Gavin Sawchuk. They still wanted a veteran player to come in and raise the floor of the room. So Gavin Blackwell will have an opportunity to do that. Squirrel White, on the other hand, that's a name that everybody, they say, what? Squirrel White injury? It sounds like something happened earlier in preseason camp, but Mike Norvell sounds, would it be fair to say, optimistic that Squirrel will be available, ready to go for the Alabama game?
Yeah, no, he definitely did. And I think from what we're hearing, it was kind of a foot ankle type of thing, not something super serious. But the guy has played so much college football, and the fact that he's been so good since he got to Florida State, he's been one of the stars. Really, he and Deuce Robinson have probably been the 2 biggest stars, certainly on offense, of preseason camp. And the fact he's played so much football, I just don't think they feel like there's a need to rush him back. So my guess is towards the end of this week, maybe getting into next weekend, which would give him a full week to kind of get back in the swing of things for the Alabama game, I think is probably the plan. If this was a younger guy who needs a lot of reps, that maybe they could force him back a little bit earlier. But I just think Squirrel White is so ready, I think, right now, that they're being pretty precautionary with that. I don't think it's anything to worry about for the Alabama game, assuming he doesn't have any setbacks.
Another development, defensive lineman Kevin Wynn, true freshman. Juju Wynn, who was being mentioned all the time by Tony White and other coaches as well over the course of the last couple of weeks. That was news that something came up for Kevin Wynn. I think literally Mike Norvell said something came up. It might have been word for word, but he said that as he was describing the prognosis, it might stretch out a little bit extra time for Kevin Wynn. So it sounds like, Ira, one of the key pieces of defensive line depth, especially that interior of the defensive line, it sounds questionable / doubtful-ish for Alabama. Am I reading that right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I would take it as well. Listen, this is why they've been pushing so hard. I mean, Tony White and Terrence Knighton, the defensive line coach, have not been bashful, telling the entire defense that they need more out of them. And we talked about this, in the shows last week after Tony White had his big, long kind of rant saying that guys need to step their asses up. We talked about two of the names we thought he was probably pointing to were likely, Daniel Lyons, KJ Sampson, a couple of those defensive linemen who've been on campus for a couple of years or more. Daniel Lyons now, I think, is in year 4. KJ Sampson's going to year 3, and they want those guys to step up. So the good news is they have people to do it. They have other guys that can step in there and fill in that defensive line, the interior of the defensive line. They're not quite built quite the same as Juju Wynn is. I mean, that guy he is built to play that middle of the defensive line in this 3-man front. But I think they've got options. They do need other guys to step up there because Wynn clearly was really having a really good camp.
And then otherwise in the trenches, Jake Rizzi, we talked about this the last time we did notes. It seems to be that ramp up is right on schedule for him, and then Jason Jenkins as well. It sounds like maybe it's not as quick of a ramp up as Rizzi, but Jason Jenkins continues to get more exposure. Would that be fair to say too?
Yeah, and I think Jenkins, again, on that defensive line, and the nice thing about the way Tony White runs this defense is there is some interchangeability about getting sometimes different shaped bodies into different roles. And, again, that's another guy that can play he could probably play in the middle at times. He's kind of a bigger defensive end, but he also has, just tremendous size at 270 plus pounds to maybe be a guy that can play sometimes in the middle of the defensive line as well. So, yeah, that's positive. And as you said, Jacob Rizzi, the news there for Mike Norvell was hinting that not just they love the fact that Jacob Rizzi is back on the offensive line to provide depth, but also it was challenging for one of the starting jobs. That's interesting. We all kind of assumed that we knew who the starting 5 was going to be. If Rizzi's challenging for one of those jobs, my guess would be maybe Adrian Medley at guard or potentially maybe at one of the tackle spots if somebody there is a little bit limited. But it's a good sign because I think Rizzi's a guy that's played a ton of college football and, just pushing those other guys to be better.
I know I've talked about this a lot. I think I'm probably hyping it up too much, but Herb Hand speaks to the media this week. It'll be very fascinating on Wednesday to hear what Herb Hand has to say about Jake Rizzi, the starting group, the backup tackles, not named Jake Rizzi because of his versatility, but Lucas Simmons, Jonathan Daniels, how those guys are coming together. Again, this week on the channel, on warchant.com, you can expect to hear from John Papuchis on Monday, Mike Norvell Tuesday, Herb Hand Wednesday, and Evan Cooper, safeties coach, on Thursday. Florida State injury updates aren't the only injury updates that we need to discuss today because Alabama lost a very important piece of their puzzle, offensive skill position player, starting running back. In fact, Ira Jam Miller suffered a collarbone injury on Saturday in the scrimmage. There's a story right now available on the site at warchant.com that you wrote. He's not going to be available for the Florida State game. So as Florida State is trying to figure out if they're missing a starter or a key reserve here and there, Alabama has confirmed that they're going to be without the running back that they expected to lean on the most for the season opener.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments when we put the story up, and a lot of people, the comments on social media have been about, oh, well, Alabama's got 18 other 5-star or 4-star running backs. It's no big deal. And that's generally true. But I do think it's a little bit concerning for them if I'm Alabama, because they have a first-time starting quarterback in Ty Simpson, who's played very limited snaps in his 4 years there. He's I think he's 29 out of 50 throughout his career, and he's only really played mop-up duty. So you're gonna have a new quarterback, and now the guy next to him in that backfield in a road game in the first game of the season is going to be a new starter. And they have a couple guys that have played college football before. They have a couple guys that played in that backfield last year. They also brought in a transfer from Louisiana. And then they have a couple of highly touted young players, a freshman, redshirt freshman, who are highly touted guys coming out of high school. But, it's different when you don't have somebody that's been a lead back in college football before. And now, guys do it all the time. It's not unheard of at running back. And Florida State's going to be counting on Usman Kromah, but we're not expecting Florida State to turn everything over to Usman Kromah right away in game 1 against Alabama. Alabama may have to do that. They're going to probably have a guy that is not expected to be a starting running back at this level in game 1. So going with an inexperienced quarterback, again, it can just lead to some uncertainty. It doesn't mean that the line's going to change dramatically. Alabama's a 13.5-point favorite. I don't think it's going to shift a ton based on that. But again, if you're a Florida State fan looking for reasons to be optimistic, nobody wants to see anybody hurt. We all feel bad for this young man, but at the end of the day, from a competitive standpoint, it's a real factor, and it could be a real factor in that game.
And depth is going to be very important for both sides. Obviously, attrition happens in camp, and we'll get to that in just a minute, speaking on Florida State's depth and some of the positions that right now maybe they're still searching for more answers. Before we do that, though, can you believe it, Ira? There are no more Saturdays left without college football. We're in it.
Beautiful.
Week 0 next week, and we are rolling. Homefield Apparel is taking over the town and getting all of our friends together, our partners at warchant.com. As you can see here on the screen, Homefield's Can't Miss Kickoff Tour comes to Tallahassee to open the season, arriving on August the 29th to August the 30th for the kickoff against Bama. And it all starts at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill Friday, 4 to 8 p.m. with a Warchant live meet and greet. We'll have a live program, Wake Up Warchant podcast taping on site at Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. This is all brought to you by our friends at Homefield in partnership with our longtime sponsors at Garnet and Gold. Awesome stuff available to you from Homefield Apparel, Garnet and Gold. They'll be providing for 21 and up people free Modelo beer if you prove that you purchased either Homefield Apparel or a proof of purchase from Garnet and Gold itself. You get a free beer. They'll be raffling off tickets to the game against Alabama that Friday night. So if you don't have tickets and you don't want to hit the secondary market, Homefield has you covered. They're also going to have a watch party at CP for those of you that can't make the game on Saturday, giving away Garnet and Gold gift cards. Remember, Homefield Apparel has awesome, awesome stuff. Take a look at some of this vintage apparel that they have available right now on homefield.com and also at Garnet and Gold. Once you get your season refresh on, remember, look at some of these vintage looks that you could be rocking from Homefield Apparel. Ira, this is always good stuff, too. Look at this Charlie Ward. Look at that Charlie Ward shirt right there.
I love the fact that the young guys like Matt Lasser on our staff and people of that age love the vintage stuff. That's the coolest thing to me. They love wearing the stuff of the players that they don't even remember playing. But obviously, if you're our age or my age or your age, we clearly that's right up our alley. So no, it's great stuff. I'm glad we have them on board.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to interacting with all of you the day before the game against Alabama at the Corner Pocket Bar and Grill. And if you're at Garnet and Gold that weekend, make sure there's a pop-up store, Homefield Apparel at Garnet and Gold. Florida State's trying to build a lot of depth now, Ira, at multiple positions. The coaches were asked about that yesterday during interviews. The coordinator spoke about this after scrimmage number 2. It seems like the consensus is that the coaching staff feels good about the starting level of the depth chart, but at certain positions, they're really trying to cultivate more options that they can lean on, not just in the Alabama game, but as you get into the ACC play about 3-4 weeks after the Alabama game. Where do you think it stands? And just judging by the answers that you've heard, what positions do you think are of most concern right now to cultivate some more depth?
Yeah, I think defensively, I think they feel pretty good about the depth at linebacker and the secondary. Again, my question to Mike Norvell yesterday during that press conference is the fact that some of those secondary roles, particularly the corner opposite of Jerry Wilson, and maybe one of the safety spots, the fact that those aren't nailed down yet, is that more of a concern because nobody has just emerged as the front runner, or is it more of a good thing because you've got a lot of really good options? He felt like it was more of a good thing. I'm sure that's what he's going to say no matter what. But I do think that they feel good about those positions. And certainly we talked about linebacker. That's a spot I think where they feel pretty good about the depth. Defensive line, they've got numbers. I don't know that they've got everybody playing at the level they want them to play at. So I think that's going to be a kind of a constant push here over these next couple of weeks. Offensively, I think those are the two areas where you're probably a little bit more concerned. Offensive line, as you talked about, we want to hear this week from Herb Hand about the tackles particularly. I think we feel like in the interior of the offensive line, they've got some options between Rizzi and Andre Otto. And, they have a couple other guys that have played college football before that they can kind of get in the mix there in the interior. The tackle spots are a little bit more iffy unless Rizzi's one of those. So we'll see on that. And then at wide receiver, I think that's the other position that they love the depth at tight end. We know they have a ton of depth at running back. Quarterback is what it is. You'd love to have more depth there in terms of experience depth, but the reality of college football, not many teams have experience depth at quarterback. So the other spot really is wide receiver. And that's where we talked earlier about you've got Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White and Javen Boggs, and that's kind of your top three. But after that, it's been pretty much a drop-off. And so they do have a lot of options. I think when we talked to Tim Harris, he talked about, the things that those guys provide you. He likes the fact that BJ Gibson gives you a guy that can play all three spots. He likes the fact, obviously they like Elijah Moore and Tayshawn Gelsey, the 2'6'4" kids. They love the size that they may be able to use in certain situations. Mai Danzy brings a great speed. He's a guy that they really seem to be excited about. They've got a couple other, Camden Fryer, it seems like he's coming around. So they've got some options, but I don't know. And then Gavin Blackwell coming back is a big one. But they'd like to see, again, that second tier really develop to where they know, okay, who's 4, 5, and 6. I don't think that they have a strong feeling about that yet, but maybe that's starting to get a little bit clearer.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch and listen for the developments from Gavin Blackwell over the next couple of weeks, just again, because he is such a veteran. And you're right, there is some crossover experience in the offenses. And clearly, according to Tim Harris, he's been hitting the books hard to make sure that he's prepared for the theory. Now he's just got to get out there physically and do it in practice. But Mai Danzy is an interesting name to me, Ira, because Gus Malzahn spoke about him after scrimmage number 2, and his eyes got big as he spoke about not only the speed, but you could tell that he was speaking about Danzy as a football player more than just a gadget type player. Could Florida State have something here in the 2 sports star more than just about go run as fast as you can, young man? Might they have a little bit of something here for a player that has just transitioned and position switched from running back to receiver in the last year?
They're sure starting to hint that that's the case. And we have a story up on the website at warchant.com for people that have subscriptions or if they want to go start one, a full story with more on Mai Danzy. But, I felt strongly that Gus Malzahn and this staff would find a way to use Mai Danzy because of his speed. Again, they tried to a little bit last year, but I thought they could have tried a little bit harder. And when he ran those wheel routes, he was playing running back last year, which probably, I don't know, he played running back in high school, so they stuck with that, but it seemed like it would be more natural to be in the passing game. And that's where he made a couple of plays last year. He did have a 38-yard catch last year on a wheel route. And that's where I thought at least they would use him this year is, getting him in some opportunities to hit some big plays. But they are talking him up like he could be a real part of the wide receiver rotation. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the 4 guy or the 5 guy. I don't know that he's going to be that high in the rotation. But clearly, he's proven himself not just as a guy who can run really fast. He's one of the fastest runners in the country in track and field. But also they talk about his physicality and blocking, the fact that he's learning to run routes better. That's awesome. I mean, he's a guy, you just don't have many guys in the sport with his kind of speed. The fact that they think he might be a guy that can get on the field more often than just as a gadget plays could be a really big thing because this offense needs more guys that can stretch the field. And he's certainly one of them.
He is. And again, Gavin Blackwell getting healthy is somebody who's considered a burner earlier in his career. Yeah. Jalen Lucas, who we haven't mentioned, listed as a running back, but he could be used as a Swiss Army knife type there. And the last thing I guess we can talk about on this topic when it comes to targets, pass catchers, again, because it sounds like the tight end room, Ira, is getting healthier. Landon Thomas now being back in the fold. That's another name that we didn't mention from the injuries. Chase Loftton potentially in the fold as well. When you're talking about the receiver room, it doesn't necessarily have to be a wide receiver. They could be looking at one of the stock of tight ends that they have to fortify the ranks. Yeah,
and Chase Loftton actually is working at both positions. That was by design. They've been working on that since he got here in the spring, is learning both to play some of the receiver positions and then also tight end. And because he's young, I think he's probably 220, 225 pounds. He's still a undersized for a tight end, but because he's such a good runner, has very good ball skills, they are going to use him at wide receiver, and that's a great point. I mean, Landon Thomas is another guy that they could use in more of a receiver role. So that's, again, as you start to see how this could come together, you'd love to feel like you had 5 or 6 really proven wide receivers, guys you could count on, but they may have to piece it together at least early in the season because they do have some other options at those other positions.
We try to keep it brief for you here on the Chant. That's what it's about. News digest, quick consumption for all of you. You get up to date on these bits of information coming out of Florida State preseason camp and practice. A couple of promotions before we head out. I'm sure Ira has a thing or two he wishes to promote. I'll start, though. Got Dominic Robinson to sit down this weekend with me to go over Tony White's defense. There's going to be a feature this week on the channel. In addition to some of the stuff that we do with Dominic, Gus Malzahn-wise or player individual videos, we've got now a Tony White 3-3-5 look and the multiplicity of what Tony White brings to the table. So be on the lookout for that on the channel. A new show, another one for Warchant Premier members, is going to be available this week called The Sauce. It's hosted by Irish Raffel, and you can talk about your other co-host who is new to the Warchant extended family, Ira, that people can find in either the Renegade Room or if you're a member of Warchant Premier, it probably will be expanding from there. And then anything else you wish to promote before we sign off for today?
Yeah, that's going to be a new show. It's going to be basically one topic, kind of a different take on this. This is more newsy. That's going to be more of a conversation. Me and a guy named Kevin Bauer, who's a longtime FSU fan, was a guy that we got to know through Seminole Headlines. He contributed a lot of questions through the years as Bauer Sauce. People may remember that name if you listen to Seminole Headlines. And so it's going to be a little bit more of a casual conversation between two people seeing things from a different perspective. He's a fan. I'm a member of the media, but looking at different topics. I think the first topic we talked about was why is it that Florida State coaches seem to lose their way? And we kind of looked at Jimbo Fisher specifically and Mike Norvell in the sense of, here were two coaches who were at the height of their careers. Jimbo won a national championship. And then within a couple of years, things really just kind of fell apart at Florida State. Mike Norvell had the 13-0 run, 20-something games, and won over 19 games in a row, had a really great run over 2 years, and then had the tailspin last year. We're going to see if he can bounce back out of it. But we talked about some of the things that led to those kind of sudden rises and then sudden downfalls. And again, the book's not written on Mike Norvell yet, but that's the kind of conversation we had there. And then we'll tackle different topics each week, but a little bit more conversational in tone. And then, yeah, man, a ton of coverage this week because not only is Florida State kind of wrapping up preseason camp here, but they're going to get into Alabama preparation. I mean, the Alabama game is almost 2 weeks away still, but they're going to use more than just that game week to prepare. They're going to really get into the installation this week, so we'll have a lot of coverage of that throughout the course of this week and leading into game week, which it's almost here, man. It's almost here.
This is the time. If you have not signed up at warchant.com yet, you can do it one of two ways. If you're a student, you can sign up for absolutely free. All you got to do is email us, support@warchant.com, from your fsu.edu email address. Welcome back, students, by the way. And you are all set and hooked up with a free membership to warchant.com. Hope you take advantage of that. And if not, and you're not a student, you can now sign up at warchant.com, just $1 for your first week. And we're going to bonus it up for you, everybody. Join warchant.com now for $1 for your first week and enjoy a complimentary year of The Athletic included with your membership. So if you want to get more news on your NFL teams, your MLB teams, I think personally they do a wonderful job in terms of MLB coverage. The Mets coverage that they do is fantastic for me, even though we can't win a ball game. I really enjoy what they have at The Athletic. So sign up. It's a double dip in your sports world. $1 for your first week at warchant.com. Sign up today. Ira, appreciate the time as always. And probably midweek we would target for another edition of the Chant. Sound right?
Sounds awesome, man. Look forward to it.